The Space God Memoirs. Season 3, Episode 16. I stood within the Octa, hovering high in the artificial skies of Hundexal's inner sphere. Far below, a whole city block was devastated. Much of it collapsed and more of it still twitching. The aftermath of Suvar's rage. I had just been snatched out of danger by the lovely Zirathra herself, who stood at the pilot's chair in her white jumpsuit. But at that instant, my gaze was focused on the bulky, trunk-faced fellow seated on the back cot, Tabalnak. Welcome back, I said to the Nyar agent, who until recently had been the closest thing to dead. Discorporated, his spirit trapped. Yes, I completed my delve into the soul-trapping crystal, said Zirathra. After a protracted battle against his programmed defenses, I was able to retrieve Tabalnak and connect him with his prepared clone.
And here I am, among the corporeal world again,
he stated, his voice baritone. It was almost shocking to see him again, alive, after looking upon his bloody corpse on the ground not long ago. I was starting to get used to the fact that we didn't really die, but it was still a bit weird. Yeah, I began. You've probably already guessed that's Suvar down there going crazy on the city. I suppose he's the one who discorporated you.
Ninda was the one who trapped me within the device. Suvar's companion.
Ninda? So she's not just a sim?
No, she is not.
So, Suvar was being truthful. She really did ascend from Garib recently.
That I am not so certain of. Our time is short, but I will tell you some of what I had been looking into before my discorporation and imprisonment.
I may already know a bit of it, but go ahead. I nodded. Zirathra remained silent, her eyes focused on something happening in the city below. Tabalnak continued.
I had been working with Suvar for some time after his own ascension, here at Hundexal. Our task involved regulating the off-stream, keeping it confidential, keeping it flowing.
What exactly is the off-stream? Even seeing records of its existence, I still didn't have any details.
It is an autric pathway across the galaxy, designed to covertly transfer a steady supply of energy to certain projects.
That's obnoxiously vague.
Covert projects, of course. You do not have the proper clearance to know of them, and truthfully, even my clearance only grants me a small knowledge of the off-stream's destination. I can tell you only that it is for defense against certain threats, located at the galaxy's edge.
A shiver ran through me as he spoke. The Veyor?
No,
he answered, providing no further details. That kind of secrecy would naturally make me suspicious.
Indeed. Suvar took it much the same. Over time, he grew especially concerned about the destination of the off-stream. He was worried that it was going to something nefarious or illegal. I could not ameliorate his fears without compromising security, and over time they grew, especially after Ninda reappeared in his life.
So, per Suvar, she just showed up one day. That she finally graduated. But I'm not so sure she's who she claims to be.
I knew Ninda as one of our candidates, as Suvar's partner and beloved. I also knew she had been left behind on Garib. The Ninda that I saw emerge nearly 2 years ago was suspiciously different, more powerful and more knowledgeable than her experience would suggest. I had not overseen her ascension, and was naturally wary of her, so I attempted to look into Ninda's records. They all added up, but such things can be falsified by those with the correct knowledge.
Like the Archon, or the Overseer.
Or a spy, someone well versed in the Monad's codes, and in acts of subterfuge. But I had no proof of such. Thus I continued to investigate in private. That is when I discovered the crime. Atra was being subtly siphoned from the off-stream, and through a channel running alongside it. It was a clever plan. Most Nyar would not have noticed it, particularly as the off-stream itself is regulated by few. Yet within the records I caught it. As you arrived at Kucingkecil, Keph, I was busy investigating this theft, examining the chain of rather suspicious worlds the Atra was going to, all the while attempting to discover who the culprits were. Thus your observations of many of the Nyar here.
Tabalnak took a breather, stretching his newly cloned body's arm over his head. Then he continued.
The explosion at the processing facility happened, which I believe was the first of their mistakes. Then we discovered their virus, implanted in the Bardo.
I nodded. The one that's been keeping the Archon on lockdown. I'm guessing it's also what gives Suvar access to all the planetoid systems. The nanites, the holograms. Tabalnak returned my nod.
Indeed. I suspect that is the case. These incidents spurred me to investigate deeper. As I examined the records, the same ones you saw in the Overseer's system, I began to see a pattern. I realized that only a person with a very specific talent at Atratech manipulation could have done such feats. And besides myself, the only possible culprit was Suvar. I was not ready to confront my student, not without certain proof. Over time he'd become more agitated, seemingly dejected with his duties. I knew that an accusation might push him over the edge. Thus, I simply put him and Ninda on my list of people for you to investigate. The day after the incident with Archon Mumavari, as I was on my way to meet with you, I was surprised to see Ninda standing there in that storage room on the surface. She had a wicked gleam in her eyes as she pointed a weapon at me and fired.
Zirathra finally looked up at us, opening her tiny mouth. We've analyzed the soul-trapping device. It was from an older model of weapon, used in the Annihilator's war. Long banned. Per Monadic records, there are only a few remaining in this entire galactic sector, all last in the possession of Veyer agents. The Veyer. That means that Ninda may just be one of them, she stated.
Your initial observation was correct, Keph,
Tabalnak said.
Ninda did not ascend. For years, Suvar kept that hologram as a companion. The Veyer must have seen that, and disguised themselves as her in order to manipulate him.
Whatever Veyer is involved, they must be quite powerful, a master of disguise, of mind manipulation and deception, Zirathra said with her customary half-smile, like she might know which exact Veyer was at fault here. That might explain why both Suvar and Ninda have abilities far outclassing their supposed ranks, I said. She nodded and replied. The Veyer agent must have linked with Suvar, granting him some of their powers. In addition to having access to the planetoid systems, this would be enough to explain what you've reported. So what are those scraggers planning? Based on what we saw from here, Z said, looking down at the ruins of the building below, nothing good. Their actions have become brash. They know that their time is nearly up, and they're going to do whatever it takes to complete their goals. Suvar's in his control chair. He's got to be linked to the Bardo, using his virus to hijack all the system controls in the station. Indeed, said Zirathra. I speculate that the Veyer agent, through Suvar, must have implanted the Archon's etheric form with a device that redirects his control to them. That weird tech mote I saw in his eye. That would be it. The Veyer are known to have developed certain tech viruses to counteract our advantages. Once it was stealthily implanted in the Archon, it effectively blinded him to their operations, while allowing Suvar and Ninda a backdoor into Kucingkecil and its Atrix streams. A shudder ran through me. Suvar's redirect module. Ninda wanted me to place that in the solar heart. She made up some story. Said it was supposed to stop the activation of some space-based weapon that was going to start a huge war.
You did not place it, correct?
Tabalnak asked. Nope. Considered it, but ended up cutting the thing in half before it could do anything.
Likely the correct choice,
Tabalnak said, nodding his oversized ears.
Describe the device.
I described it to him. A starfish-looking metallic widget. He shook his large head and puffed out some air from his trunk.
Activating that device would have allowed Suvar and his accomplice to instantly redirect all the Atra in this facility to their own stream. Enough Atra to power an entire galactic sector.
Such a transfer would have been enough to destroy this entire planetoid in the process, added Zirathra. You were wise to decide against it. So I wonder, I began, running a hand through my thick black hair. Was that their whole plan? Just snag a bunch of Atra and ditch us all? Zirathra looked downward for a moment before speaking. There must be something deeper to it. We still do not know where they are diverting the Atra to, what they planned on doing with it.
Neither do we know how those sigils you saw were connected,
added Tabalnak with a shrug. I almost wanted to mention my other lifetime. That mysterious pilot and his self-destruct over Aruvis. How that deep inner voice had told me this was all connected to me. But I didn't. Instinct told me to hold off on that info. Z and T might have been friends, but for now my distant past would remain private. I kept my words silent and my thoughts subdued. Whatever the deeper truth is, Suvar and his Ninda are still at large, still a threat, said Zirathra after a second. Now that their scam's exposed, I said, I suppose they're going to take as much Atra as they can get their hands on before scragging off somewhere. And in the process, they will devastate the planetoid. Zirathra released a long breath through pursed lips. I looked down through the window at the scene below. An entire city block collapsed into rubble, the buildings around it flailing like rubber. Could it get worse? The effects on those in the Bardo will be far worse. Zirathra nodded. Draining it of Atra will cause it to implode. While souls cannot be annihilated, their essences will be scattered, their identities forgotten, some driven to madness. Rayleigh, Burge, these months I'd been here they'd spent in the Bardo, living their lives in peace. My friends had come with me from Aruvis, hitched onto my body before going in there. No way I was going to let something like that happen to them. We need to stop this, I said.
That I can assist with,
said Tabalnak.
With my command of Atra technology, I can temporarily suppress some of Suvar's out-of-control powers. That will allow us to get close to him.
Are we gonna discorporate him?
Suvar is not a villain.
Tabalnak shook his head.
He is being manipulated.
Besides, added Zirathra, discorporating him while he's in the Bardo would only accelerate his mental decline, and would not remove him from the system. So what's the plan? Tabalnak will put up a shield and allow us to fly close to Suvar. You, Keph, will connect with Suvar and link to the local Bardo through him. Once inside, you will find him and bring him out. Me? I raised an eyebrow and opened my mouth. Wouldn't you be better suited to that, Z? I will be hunting and neutralizing Ninda, or whatever Veyer agent is behind her. Judging by what we've seen of them, I suspect your task will be simpler. I nodded, gulping. I didn't relish facing Suvar and his craziness for the second time in an hour. Zirathra at the pilot's helm, we zoomed back down, towards the waiting cityscape. Tabalnak remained upon the cot, eyes closed, concentrating. My skin tingled, his Atric field extending out to encompass our Octa. As we descended to street level, parts of buildings lurched towards us, wires reaching out like tentacles, nanite clouds hovering like flesh-eating insects. They all swarmed as one, directed by Suvar's berserk will. But they all fell away as they touched Tabalnak's aura, crashing back down to the ground. The ship wove its way between the towers of Kucingkecil, zipping up and down as it evaded moving walls and shifting scenery. Then I could see Suvar's apartment, now standing alone like a monument amid the collapsed structures of his entire block. An absorber leapt at us from below, hurling its metallic humanoid body at the Octa. But one blast from Zirathra's cannon was enough to send it careening off. We now hovered just above Suvar's balcony.
Go, Keph,
said Tabalnak, opening one of his eyes.
I will force the door open for you. Connect with Suvar, enter the Bardo with him, and get him out.
I nodded, looking out the doorway of the Octa. I made the 5-foot leap, landing right in front of the entry to Suvar's room. The door that had been tight-locked before now spun open, revealing what had once been his quarters. The whole room now looked like a grid of sensors, wires, and tubes, all interconnected and woven together like some bizarre hive form in a dull, steely hue. Suvar still sat in his chair, but was barely recognizable. So many metallic tubes latched onto him like parasites, descended from the ceiling. He twitched steadily as he sat otherwise still in his chair, his body trapped by all the tech surrounding him. I rushed in. Tabalnok's suppression field would only last so long. I reached out, touching the little canid man on both shoulders. I gritted my teeth, then stared directly at his eyes, rolled back into his head. Letting out a breath, I projected my consciousness forward. The zooming sensation, the now familiar jumble of words and thoughts, as I sunk into his mind, losing all sense of my own physical body. Then I once more stood beneath the purple skies of the Bardo, the air crisp and sweet, the lush green hills host to a multitude of mansions, everything so lustrous, so real, so vital. But this time it was different. The nearby buildings were flickering, their appearances shifting to different architectural styles or materials with each second that passed. The air, too, was distorted, filled with golden specks of light that would occasionally throb, expanding out into spiky, cancerous-looking growths before again receding into mere particles. In the background was a constant whistle that reminded me of a whale. It came from straight above, where I could feel the pull of Suvar's inflamed consciousness. I gazed upward. There waited the immense face of Archon Lumavari, but in place of the prior benevolent serenity, he wore a confused expression, his mile-wide lips contorted, the entire face frozen in place like some continent in the sky. His left eye, which before had held a mote, was no longer visible, covered entirely by a twisted lattice of crystal-like material, shifting along with the buildings below into various geometric forms. Beams of light, golden and resplendent, streamed into that crystalline structure. The Atra being redirected. Just looking at it, I could tell it was no longer just a subtle theft. No longer the trickle hidden within the off-stream, but a scrag-load more. From somewhere nearby, a scream resounded. I turned away from the Archon's titanic head, down towards the riverbank, some 20 feet away. A robed Nayar stood, facing off with what I could describe as unfiltered chaos. The entity was bigger than 3 people combined, an amoeba-like blob whose body constantly warped and contorted, forming and losing countless limbs. The inside of its translucent membrane was filled with static, flickering chaotically. The scream had come from the Nayar, a hairless, pink-skinned person who furiously tore at their own chest. They were covered in a globule of that same static goo from within the creature, their face contorted in horror. I could only watch, as within seconds the person fell to pieces, bits of them rapidly crumbling away, dissolving into the air as the monstrous slime ate away. The Nayar's scream faded off into oblivion, as the remainder of their body vanished. I shuddered. Zerathra had just said that souls couldn't die, but I wondered what experiencing that would do to a person, and how long it would take them to recover. Before the weird being could notice me, I popped myself into stealth mode, watching it wander off down the riverbank. A quick glance around the local Bardo, and I could tell that wasn't an isolated incident. All across the garden paths there were battles going on, the discorporate Nayar against the Atric amoebas. Those flailing chaos beasts were everywhere, lurching from the entries of houses, crawling from the riverbank, ballooning through the skies like great windbags. These things, they had to be connected to what Suvar was doing in here. Scrag. I had to stop this. Again, I could feel him up there, Suvar's consciousness somewhere inside that weird crystal prison in the Archon's eye. But first I had to get my friends out of here. Through my old connection to Rayleigh and Burge, I could sense them nearby. I lifted off and coasted through the air, an easy feat within the Bardo. I ignored all the weird blobs, the panicking people, the fighting. Soon I found their neighborhood, a collection of pleasantly rustic homes, built into the side of a wooded hill, with a view of a distant mountain range. Nobody was visible from the air, but I had visited them here before, and I could recognize their house. Soon I spotted it, and landed in the yard. Rayleigh and Burge dwelt together in a sensibly spacious structure of wood, its carved archways covered in tended vines, garden beds growing versions of flowers I recognized from back on Aruvis. From within the house came the warm blaze of a hearth and the scent of berry bread. Neither of them was in sight. Suddenly, the house flickered. The arch above the entry was now a set of columns that supported a small balcony above. "Burge? Rayleigh?" I called out. I could still sense them on the periphery of my awareness, nearby, though there was no sign of them. A beam of light struck the house from above. It continued to flicker, its features changing repeatedly as particles of Atra zipped off into the skies. Then the house utterly vanished, leaving behind a barren plot of land. In the home's place was one of those creatures, a sack of static energy, pulsating violently as it thrust its mass towards me. I had time to manifest a drawn twist blade in my hands, stepping backward as the blob hurled a pseudopod my way. In the moment's surprise, I had dropped my stealth. The blob pulsed forward, its globulous bulk drifting closer. Before I could act, a blast of radiant energy came from my right, striking the creature on its side, causing bits of it to vanish into the nethers. There stood Rayleigh, winking at me as she looked from the sights of a shiny silver blaster pistol. From my other side, Burge sped into view, holding a rune-covered gold warhammer in his hands. He slammed the hammer into the monster, electrical energy spreading from it like lightning. I struck as well, following my companion's attacks with a set of wide sideways slashes, cutting bits off the blob with each swing of my fluid blade. The amoeba thing shrunk with each blow upon it, though it continued to flail at us chaotically with its undefined limbs. I winced as it leveled a pseudopod at Burge, nearly striking him. He was able to get up his hammer in time to block, though the weapon was covered in a mass of slime. Burge dropped it to the ground, and in less than a second the warhammer had dissolved back into the Bardo. Burge stepped away, as did me and Rayleigh, keeping our distance from the diminished blob. Seconds later, my two friends looked at one another, and then simultaneously blasted it with energy from their hands, focusing twin green beams upon it in a concentrated surge. The monster dissipated just like the house had, as if it had never been there. "You two have leveled up a bit," I commented, tossing them each a wink. "Yes," said Rayleigh, "though we all know that manifesting is far easier in the Bardo." "But that don't matter much now, it seems," added Burge. "The house is gone, and things are looking pretty scragged out here." He shook his head at the empty lot. "Yeah, that's why I'm here. Things have come to a head out there in Kucingkecil. Crazy scrag-and-dug-a-dung, and it may just get even worse in the Bardo. I'm here to fix it, but not before I make sure you two are okay." Not far away, their neighbors' homes are also starting to vanish, their Atra sucked away and pulled towards the incapacitated Archon. More of those creatures would appear shortly. "We're managing," said Rayleigh, "but this place isn't safe." Burge nodded in agreement with his partner. "Come with me," I said, "just for now." Seeing the chaos erupting around them, the very world collapsing and vanishing, neither of my friends could argue. Rayleigh stepped into me, then Burge did. As they did so, I could feel both of their essences again entwining with my own, their psyches integrating with mine. Their Bardo bodies entirely vanished. I could now feel them beside me, orbiting my thoughts, companions in spirit again. It was comfortable. It felt right, like they were part of me and always had been. "Welcome back," I thought at my two oldest companions. But there was hardly time for a lengthy reunion. My head jerked upward, towards the grand face of the Archon staring down in all his mighty impotence, his left eye encased in Suvar's crystalline growth. That's why I was here. Something needed to be done, and I was the one to do it. I floated up, willing my incorporeal form to rise towards the sky. As I drew closer to the ever-shifting geometry, streaming with the light of uncounted Atric particles, I could see more of those blobs floating in its circumference. Where the light of the Atra touched upon the purple-gray surface of the crystal enclosure, those amoeba things appeared, flickering as they merged from the walls between realities. There were hundreds of them up there, hovering like loathsome balloons, flailing their limbs, aglow with static crackle. I re-enabled my stealth mind and coasted forward, careful to maneuver around the slimy things. Finally, I reached the surface of Suvar's matrix. Up close it resembled some surreal sky fortress, its walls shimmering and reflective, their form moving constantly in spinning fractal patterns. A tenseness lurked here, an anger simmering from inside, felt as a prickle upon my etheric flesh. An opening awaited me, a gaping hole in the center of the mass, a constant upon its ever-changing surface, dark and shadowy, yet beckoning me forward. I flew inside. Thank you for listening to this episode of The Space God Memoirs. Space God is written, performed, and produced by A.M. Arctos. Original musical score by Alpha Colors. Various sound effects created by Industrial Strength Records Incorporated. Please support this podcast by following, rating, and sharing on your favorite social media site. For further info on Space God, its creator, and various other opinions, musings, and thoughts, go to www.spacegodmemoirs.com or follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or Facebook. If you enjoyed the Space God Memoirs, please consider supporting us by becoming a patron. Check out the Patreon link in our description to learn more.